Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Suzanne Pichetti Johnson. I'm with Avenues to Wellness, and we are a program of the Frank R. Howard Foundation. And I am especially excited about this topic today because it involves raising awareness around mental health issues. And our topic is, let's talk mental health, understanding the impact of trauma. I'm here today with Brittany Lucas, Lindsey Painter, and Christine Hawley. They are with Redwood Community Services, and we are delighted and grateful that they're with us today. Thank you girls so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to get started, you've been working on a project called MendoMHAT, Mental Health Awareness Training. What exactly is that?
So what that is a mental health awareness training project to serve Mendocino County. We have been serving the county since 2018 with this project. We're in our third year. And what that looks like is that we are serving the populations that serve those struggling with mental health, and we are providing them training on how to make a mental health referral, how to be able to de-escalate a situation, how to be able to provide soft skills for someone until they can receive the mental health services they need, suicide prevention tools, along with many other tools.
Who are the populations that you serve under MHAT?
So we serve many populations. We serve primarily school staff. We serve family resource centers staff. We serve Head Start staff. We serve health clinic staff. We serve veterans and their family members. And we serve basically anyone in Mendocino County that serves others that need help with mental health awareness and tools.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So you really reach out over the whole Mendocino County?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So regionally, we are located in Ukiah.
Uh-huh.
However, between in-person and with virtual services, we reach every nook and cranny in the county. So we really have served Point Arena, we've served Covelo, we've served Leggett Valley, we've served Potter Valley.
So often those communities are ignored because they're kind of distant, and
Right.
So thank you for acknowledging them and working with them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things we love about this project is that it allows us to provide some mental health support to areas that are really underserved.
Uh-huh.
Because they're farther away from the more populated areas, and so they often don't receive the kind of support that we would receive like in the Ukiah or Willits area.
Exactly.
And one of the greatest things about this project is it gives us the flexibility to go out and provide those trainings in person. And so we have that kind of financial support to do it. And now that we're doing virtual trainings, we're even, allowed to do more trainings in person and virtually all across the region.
Wow, so the pandemic has in a way broadened your ability to connect with people.
In some ways, yeah. I
Uh-huh.
mean, obviously the pandemic makes some things more difficult. We have had to drastically reduce our in-person trainings and, provide them
Okay.
outside, but we have switched to a virtual platform, which does allow us to train like a wide variety of people, even people from different geographic areas in the same training.
Very good. Why is it important to understand trauma and its effects on us personally and the people we serve?
Right. So a majority of our curriculums touch on a certain aspect of trauma. And to really understand the impact of trauma on a person or the clients that you're serving, you have to understand stress first. And there's, positive stress, which is actually healthy for development. And this is like, getting nervous when you're sitting in front of a camera talking to someone. It's like you have that little bit of adrenaline, a tiny bit of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and it actually, helps provide oxygen to the brain. That's great. Then there's more tolerable stress, which actually could be, it could look differently for anyone, but it could be, the loss of a loved one or something sudden or tragic. but it's tolerable if it's buffered with extra support in really good relationships. And then there's toxic stress, which is what we would also call trauma, which is where you experience something that's very sudden, very traumatic, and don't have the internal or the external ability to deal with it. And what can happen is if you have unresolved trauma or unhealed trauma, is it lives in your body. And when trauma lives in your body for a long amount of time, you start to have kind of an array of symptoms, both physically, mentally, emotionally, etc. So what we're trying to do here is try to help people see the difference between the types of trauma and give them tools to kind of mitigate those symptoms.
So practical, and we don't learn it in school, do we?
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a thing called the resiliency zone that we've learned about while doing our trainings. So the resiliency zone is a zone in which we can experience like sadness or anxiety, but it's within our range of tolerance. Christine's going to draw it on the board there. So we have 2 lines which represent our ability to handle stress. And then within that, we have like a little wavy line. So at the top of the wavy line, we might be experiencing a little bit of anxiety or anger maybe. And at the bottom, we might be experiencing a little bit of sadness or depression, but it's within our ability to cope with it. So when we experience trauma, what happens is we end up bouncing outside of our resiliency zone, outside of those lines, which is our ability to tolerate. And if we get stuck up high outside of the resiliency zone, we end up with maybe anger or rage or high anxiety. And if we get stuck low outside of our resiliency zone, we end up with depression or withdrawal kind of symptoms. So sometimes what happens when we experience trauma, if we don't find a way to release that trauma from our bodies, then we end up stuck outside of our resiliency zone for a long period of time. And our body attempts to adjust to what it considers like this new normal of being stressed out all the time or anxious all the time or depressed all the time. And eventually our body starts to break down because it was not designed to maintain that level of stress for a long period. And so that's when we start getting symptoms. And so sometimes our symptoms will be, chronic depression, chronic anxiety. Sometimes our symptoms will be physical. So we'll get sick a bunch of times, or our hair will fall out, or we'll start getting stomach problems, or lots of different things that can happen, high blood pressure, different kinds of pain. And a lot of that can be traced back to trauma. For our society doesn't really know how to deal with trauma very well. And so that's part of why we like this project, because we want to get out into the world ways that people can deal with their trauma so that they can bring themselves back into a state of balance inside their resiliency zone.
That is beautifully explained, and that graphic there really says it all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With the anxiety going above and the depression going below.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that explanation. Lindsey, can you tell me, what are ACEs? ACES.
ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's based on a study that they did in the 90s, where they asked people about 10 different kinds of traumas, and then people would report how many traumas they had when they were children, and then they would study their health outcomes as adults. So partly mental health, but also physical health. And they discovered that there is a very powerful connection between how many traumas a person experiences in childhood and how negatively their health outcomes are going to be as adults.
Wow.
So it was a really powerful study that shows how strongly our bodies and brains are connected. Because in the past, our society has kind of dealt with our brains and bodies as if they weren't completely separate. If we're having some kind of body ailment, we go see a doctor. If we're having something emotionally wrong, we go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But we're starting to realize more and more how deeply interconnected our brains and bodies are. And so that's how the ACEs study can really show us that deep connection.
Okay.
And some of the findings were if someone answered, that they had 4 or more ACEs, meaning they've experienced 4 of those 10 traumas, they had significantly higher rates of heart disease and diabetes. Their rates of depression significantly increases, as well as suicide attempts. And those that answered with a 6 or more, which again, they experienced 6 of those traumas, had a 4,600% increase in becoming an IV drug user. And their life expectancy was shortened by 20 years. So they actually
Goodness.
died an earlier age.
It can
really dramatic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It can sound a little bit like sad news, but I think that in a way it can be hopeful. Because it tells us that if we can intervene with children early and prevent these ACEs from happening, we can really dramatically change the outcome of a child's life. And I think it also can be empowering for people who experienced ACEs in childhood, because what that means is they've had significant obstacles that their peers have not had. And so if they've had trouble as an adult, that's not their fault. It's not because they are doing something terribly wrong. It's because they have more challenges because of these ACEs. And so I think that can be empowering and helpful to people to realize that a lot of the things that I've been struggling with are things that happen to me, not things that I'm, bad choices that I'm making or whatever.
Yeah, in some ways like validating too.
Yeah.
So asking the question, what happened to you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. What are some of the successes that you've had with this project?
All right, so like we mentioned, we've been all around Mendocino County providing in-person trainings. One of our successes is going virtual, having that virtual platform where we're able to reach a wider span of people. And we've also expanded our curriculums, and we're doing more content. And we plan to, roll out some newer content to look forward to. Another thing that we did that we're pretty proud of and took a lot of work was something that we ended up naming, which was the Veteran and Family Wellness Event. And what that was is we worked in partnership with Ukiah VA Clinic, and we set up a fair, a wellness fair. And it was at Todd Grove Park in Ukiah on like a beautiful sunny September. And we had over 100 people, 150 people in attendance, many of them veterans or family members of veterans. And there were, over 20 community booths and vendors that really targeted specific health aspects. So we had clinics come and, check blood pressure. We had family resource centers come and share the kind of services that they support people with. And then in conjunction with, those 20 booths is we had, a jumpy bouncy house. Yeah. We provided a free pancake breakfast thanks to the Lions Club. So it was a really successful event. And it really, we felt, helped the veterans and the family members get a bigger and better idea of what is in our community.
So people provided specific resources for veterans and their families. Like what does Adventist Health provide for veterans? What does, and we even had is it called Pets for Vets? I can't remember, but a program where veterans can adopt pets without paying the fee, and just different community members that have services specifically for veterans that veterans may not know about. So they were able to go to the different booths and look at what our community can provide you that you may not even knew existed.
So you really focus on particular groups and populations. You target particular,
Yes.
like the veterans.
Yes. So the beauty of this project is, for this example, with this wellness fair, is we were able to really pull everyone together within the community, see what they have to offer the veterans. And then same with providing trainings. I mean, even if we think of our virtual trainings, we are providing them a menu of topics and saying, do you want this in person or virtually? which topics do you want? What's your time frame? What days and times are best for you? Do you need us Saturdays? Do you need us evenings? Do you need us partially virtually, partially in person? Do you need a series? Are you looking for a 4-piece series so we can really support your program or your school? We've had moments where schools have decided to partner and to receive our trainings. And so we really adapt to the population's needs.
You tailor it specifically for your population, yeah. Is there any particular organization that you want to work with right now? And that you have not worked with?
Well, I know that Adventist Health has really been on our list.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
super.
Yeah, we would love
I
to
know
work
a
with
lot
them.
of people at Adventist Health.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we provide a lot of mental health trainings that are really useful for medical staff. But it's been just the organization's really large, and so it's sometimes difficult in those large organizations to get these things scheduled.
But it sounds like you can tailor it to meet their needs too.
Yeah.
Yes. We're hoping
Okay.
with our virtual platforms, we might be able to
Okay.
provide them better
Good
opportunities.
to know.
And I'll be speaking more about this curriculum later, but actually nurses and new doctors experience something called compassion fatigue at a higher rate than any other professional in profession. So it's just
Especially
astounding.
now.
Right. So I think it's important information
Yeah.
for, clinics, hospitals, emergency rooms, et cetera, to receive.
Compassion fatigue, and we will be talking about that.
Right, yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, so can you talk about the trainings and the resources that you provide?
We can start with crisis communication. That'll probably lead into
Okay.
a lot of them. That is our communication training. It is primarily based out of PROACT principles, which is an evidence-based practice. And what we do is we tailor the principles within that curriculum to meet the population's needs. So what that curriculum has to offer, for example, is de-escalation tools, understanding the framework of the crisis cycle, early interventions, precautions, being able to understand when and where to intervene, understanding body language, understanding that communication is not only verbal. And so being able to really lend control to someone by communicating with them to help them back to what we call their baseline, which means a safe place for someone. Okay, so that training often is either tied in with other topics, or very much of the time we start with that piece so that people understand how to intervene, understand when to intervene, understand the level of dangerousness in a situation, and when they're enough of a resource or when someone needs more resources.
I see.
And one of my favorite things about this particular curriculum is the principle of self-control and how our behavior can directly influence the safety of the environment and can influence someone else's behavior. So if someone is significantly escalated, by putting our energy into the crisis, we can actually make it worse and we can make it more dangerous. And so there's a whole component on, recognizing, when, us as ourselves, move from baseline, which means, we're starting to escalate, and, coming up with some really simple strategic tools that you can do in the moment that can get you kind of back down, regulated, so you're more effective in providing, communication and support to the person.
And they've done some studies on that, just that component, the self-control component, which is only one part of a much larger curriculum. But having teachers, for example, who work with students who are very high risk, they have how many violent incidents happened, and then the teacher implemented a self-control plan at this date, and the dramatic decline of violent incidents, because once the teachers were able to maintain their own self-control, they weren't contributing to the escalation. And so they were able to maintain their own control, and then while they were in control and thinking clearly, they were better able to intervene and help de-escalate without anyone getting hurt.
And so the numbers showed how effective it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what is meant by an evidence base.
Yes.
Okay, Thank you. Really powerful.
Another one of our trainings is called Mental Health First Aid. And mental health first aid is actually being provided by MCOE. So we contracted with them, and so they provide mental health first aid trainings to the community. And they do theirs slightly differently than we have been doing it, but they have been working in conjunction with us on the same project. So theirs is about skill-based training that teaches about mental health and substance use issues. So just as you would, if you were using CPR to like assist someone temporarily until they can get to professional help, mental health first aid is about assisting someone who's in a crisis until we can get them hooked up with professional help. And the next one is QPR. So QPR is our suicide prevention training. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. And even though suicide is a very triggering and difficult topic, it's one of my favorite trainings to train because it's so immediately impactful. QPR believes that anyone can prevent suicide. And really the statistics back up that almost any positive thing that you do to try to stop someone's suicide is going to be better than doing nothing. And so if we can get out into the world the idea that that you can prevent suicide, you do have the tools to help people in your life that you love who may be at risk of suicide. People often, they freeze up and they don't know what to do, and then they may lose someone, and that's always just very tragic for them. And so the QPR Institute believes that anyone, even people who aren't mental health professionals, are able to prevent suicide. And actually, we did a suicide prevention training, and one of the people in the training left the training partway through and kept coming back and asking questions and leaving, and we found out later that that person was in that moment dealing with a crisis in which someone was suicidal and using the tools that we gave them while we were training. So that's like an example of how immediately impactful that training is.
Wow.
Because it can really help people who are at risk, and we want to be able to save their life.
Christine, can you tell us about the bystander effect and how it relates to this QPR training?
Sure. So the bystander effect is based on the notion that if anyone is thinking about suicide or considering suicide, it's most likely to occur in the general public or around friends and family. It's very, very unlikely to be in the location at that same time with, medical professionals or even a therapist. So, as someone is considering suicide, usually it's going to be bystanders, people, walking down the street, friends, family. And so it's very similar to CPR and the Heimlich maneuver in that usually the people that are going to intervene immediately are the people that are immediately around you on a general day-to-day basis. The idea here is if you train, 100 people in QPR, you're going to save one life. If you train 1,000 people, you're going to save 100 lives. And if you train, thousands of people in QPR, you're actually going to just save many, many, many lives. So that's the idea.
So just like CPR is an invitation to the community to learn how to save lives,
Right.
The same for QPR.
Mm-hmm. And QPR is similar in that when we perform CPR, we are not expecting to save their life and cure them, right? Our job is to keep them alive until the professionals arrive. And it's the same with QPR. It would be our job to prevent a suicide from happening until that person can get professional help.
That's a helpful analogy to think of them sort of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the invitation for all of us to learn it,
Right.
to save lives.
One of our other curriculums that we provide is something called trauma-informed care. This particular training really gives participants a understanding of the prevalence of trauma, especially the prevalence of trauma in the clients that we work with, if you are in any kind of direct service. And so if we understand that a majority of our clients have experienced trauma and maybe even have unresolved or unhealed trauma, then we can work with them in a more compassionate and empathetic way. And so what it does is it goes, through the symptoms of trauma, how trauma manifests in the mind and body. And then at the very end, we talk about ways that you can be trauma informed. And so one of the ways that you can be trauma informed is, teach people about the connection of the mind and the body, which means, the emotions that we experience can also come as physical sensations in our body. And so the importance of that is if we can recognize the physical sensations in our body and, focus only on positive sensations, we're actually in turn going to change, our emotional perception, so to speak. So that's one of the ways. Also just being really attentive to language. Instead of saying, drug addict, we would say, someone experiencing, a drug addiction. Instead of saying, relapse, we're going to say someone that is having a setback. And so there's just ways that we can kind of shift our language that really honors the person, honors what they've gone through. And like Lindsey touched on earlier, a lot of the times the trauma that we experience isn't necessarily self-imposed. It happened to us. And so it really is a paradigm shift. We're really shifting the question of what's wrong with you to what happened to you and how can I help? And then even later, what might you use your story, your trauma story, as a fuel for making a difference in the community? So it's really having people identify the characteristics that help them survive the trauma and cope with the trauma, and then use that information to kind of build on their own resiliency and also build hope and resiliency for other people around them.
Very good. And have you taught this in the schools? Is that one of your target audiences? Okay.
Yeah, we've actually done more school trainings, I think, than any other category. So we do a lot of school trainings, and we have requests for a lot of different types of trainings from schools. Since coronavirus, we've had a lot of call for our compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma, which is, we're going to get more into that later, but it's kind of a self-care kind of curriculum. And so the teachers who are burnt out and stressed out because they're trying to basically redo the entire educational system on the fly, they are feeling at max stress. And so the best way we can support them in many situations is by providing information that validates what they're feeling, and then tools that they can use to help them de-stress and release that toxic stress from their life. But we get calls for all different kinds of trainings in schools. So we've done QPR, and we've done collaborative problem solving and trauma-informed care and lots of different things, whatever they need.
And I think collaborative problem solving is the one that people are most interested in if they're school-based, right?
Yeah, we get a lot of call for. So why don't I just talk about collaborative problem solving? Collaborative problem solving is a curriculum that it works for all ages. It works for kids, it works for adults, but we often focus on kids in the training. And so when we look at kids who are having behaviors that are frustrating to us, challenging behaviors, what adults have done traditionally is think like that kid has a problem and we need to motivate them better to behave better. And so we'll create like a reward and punishment system or something like that to try to get them to behave better. Well, collaborative problem solving, the philosophy is kids do well if they can. That is, if kids are provided the opportunity and have the obstacles removed from them, they are going to do well. They are going to meet our expectations. They already want us to be proud of them. They already want to do well. So if they aren't doing well, it means something's missing for them. And so collaborative problem solving helps us identify what's missing for them. If it's a social or emotional skill, like they're having difficulty expressing their needs in words, or they're having difficulty maintaining attention during activities, or they're having difficulty transitioning from one activity to another. So if we can identify what the lagging skills are, then we can sit down collaboratively with them and problem solve. And as we do that, we are going to be building those skills. So over time, those skills are going to be built up and those kids are going to be more successful, and we're going to see an overall reduction in challenging behaviors. And it can work at home, and it can work at school. It can work really anywhere where people are working with people with challenging behaviors. And we've done this training in like preschools where we were dealing with toddlers, and we've done this training for school-age kids or people who work with school-age kids, and we've done this training for adults, people who work with adults. So it really works across the lifespan. I looked up some stats on this. When collaborative problem solving is used long-term, 6 out of 10 teachers report significantly less stress in their classrooms. There is a 73% reduction in oppositional behaviors during school, a 25% reduction in school office referrals, and 71 fewer self-inflicted injuries to the child. We see improvement in child's executive functioning, improvement in child-parent interactions, less parent stress, and less violent behavior in children. So it really empowers the child when we sit down with them and say, like, hey, we want to work together with you on the same team to try to solve this problem. This is a problem that we're having, but also a problem that you're having, right? Like the child is also having a difficulty, and that's why we're seeing this behavior. So if we can help the child get down to the root of their difficulty and then understand that we also have a difficulty and then problem solve to try to figure that out, that can really empower them. It gets them on board with wanting to work with us. It helps build those skills, and it helps them ultimately be really successful. It's a really fun training.
It sounds great, and it's really, there's an equity between the child and the parent.
Yeah.
Or the child and the teacher, instead of, I'm going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
There's that equity there.
We're trying to reduce that power differential between the adult and the child. And so that can really help the child feel like they have more control, and they have more of a say. And a lot of times kids come up with solutions that we adults didn't even think about. And sometimes when kids express what their real problem is, it's something we had no idea, and it's something that's really easy to solve. So sitting down with them and really empathizing with them and listening to their perspective is a useful exercise for us as well as for the kids.
Instead of just assuming we know what's going on.
Exactly.
Oh, that's really powerful, really. Yeah. So the next part of your project is compassion, fatigue, and vicarious trauma. What can you tell us about that, Christine?
Yeah. So the next curriculum that we provide is something called compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. And what that is compassion fatigue is the cumulative effect of caring. And so oftentimes people that care for other people that have either experienced direct trauma or toxic stress will actually take on that trauma and stress, and it can actually manifest as symptoms of PTSD. And so an example of this could be someone that is maybe hearing horrific details of their client's sexual assault. And then it could be days, weeks, months, years later, that particular interaction and hearing those details can actually cause the caregiver to have symptoms of PTSD. And so what we're starting to see is that people are profoundly impacted by the work that they do. Any of us can experience compassion fatigue if we work with vulnerable people, whether that be children, adults. It could be also professionally or personally. And so professionally, it would be social workers, direct providers, teachers, doctors, nurses. And then personally, it could be caring, again, for your parents or the stay-at-home mom. That's just a curriculum that we're really excited about because we get to validate people's feelings when they're feeling maybe taxed or burned out and they don't really understand what's happening to their body and why they're feeling this way. And then the whole second half of the training, we give them 5 self-care techniques that directly impact the physiology of their body. And so what I mean by that is we'll teach them a breathing technique. And breathing is directly related to calming our nervous system down. So if we can regulate our breath, we can actually re-regulate our nervous system and kind of get us back into balance in this homeostasis. And so that's just one of the activities and exercises that we lead people through. Some other ones, progressive muscle relaxation, EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. It's a tapping technique. And so these body-based experiences can actually help, one, restore balance of our nervous system and begin the healing of stuck trauma in the body.
Wonderful. Have you worked with the police department at all?
That's a great question. So we haven't, and we've been doing this project now for over 3 years, but we just aligned a partnership with them. So we're really hoping that we're gonna be able to provide trainings to them in the next 5 years of our project, and that includes specifically Willits and Ukiah PD and the Sheriff's Office.
I was also thinking about your crisis communication curriculum
Yeah.
too for them.
Right.
Could really be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm glad you've made a connection with them. So the next part of your project is how to make a mental health referral in Mendocino County.
One of the things that we discovered is that making a mental health referral can be a very confusing process. And one of the statistics that we found is that about 18% of adults in the United States have a diagnosable anxiety disorder, but only 37% of those people are receiving any treatment for that. So that means there are quite a lot of people walking around with a diagnosable anxiety disorder and not receiving treatment for that. And it's not just anxiety, of course. There's lots of other conditions that people should be seeking mental health services for. I personally think therapy is wonderful and everyone should be doing it.
I agree.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Everybody go sign up for a therapist. But one of the things that we try to do is we try to teach people what the process is of signing up for mental health services for yourself or for someone else. So if you want mental health services for your kid or for your student or for your neighbor or for your parent, how would you go about doing that? And so we have a little, it's between maybe 15 or 20 minute presentation that we add on to some of our other curriculums that kind of breaks down the process to make it easy to understand. And then we have a few times continued communication with people to help answer questions on that topic. So, for example, that training we did where there was a person who was receiving suicide intervention during the training, we connected with them 2 or 3 times after that to answer questions about the mental health process to make sure that that person was properly connected with mental health. So that's what we do, is we try to break it down so that it's easy to understand and people feel empowered to go out and seek mental health services for themselves or someone else.
And so you give a step-by-step of how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And does that sometimes involve talking to more than one therapist as part of it, or?
So what we provide is we provide resources directly for Mendocino County. So what we do is we break down the barriers and the confusion of where do I start? Where do I go? Who can actually help me? What does this mean if I have private insurance? What if this means if I don't even know if I have insurance? What if I don't know if this child has insurance? I don't know if this person qualifies. There's a lot of unknowns to it, right? If this person's been incarcerated, are they still provided services? If this child doesn't show any proof of insurance, are they provided services? Mm-hmm. If I don't, what can I do for these people without this information? And so what we do is we break down those barriers and we eliminate that confusion. We have tools like flowcharts that are given in the trainings as handouts. We have direct resources with addresses and phone numbers here in Mendocino County. So we are not giving 800 numbers that are going to get you in Nebraska. These are where you can go here in Mendocino County that can support you and eliminate that confusion.
Excellent. So you break down the barriers and a lot of the logistical things that keep people from getting therapy.
Yes.
So practical. I love it.
We do too.
So Brittany, can you tell us about the future of this project?
Yes, it's exciting. Are you ready?
Oh, good. Yeah.
So we've been working on this for 3 years, and our first year, we scored way above what we had expected. Our charts were just phenomenal. The fact that we were able to move into virtual platforms and still be able to keep this project moving and surviving and thriving during the epidemic has really proved that our community still needs these services. So we are looking at the end of our 3-year project in September, and we're looking at extending it 5 more years. It will have the same name, it will have the 3 of us, and we will still be reaching everywhere within the county that we can. What we're going to do is expand with more curriculums. We're going to expand the population. So like Christine spoke to, we're expanding to law enforcement, we're expanding to first responders, and we are upping the numbers for the populations that we're already serving. So we're going to be pushing even harder to reach the schools, the family resource centers, the clinics, the veterans and family members of veterans. We are going to be pushing our limits for the next 5 years. We're saying we went way beyond what we thought we could do even in this 3 years, so sky's the limit. We're really focusing on expanding in every way possible in the next 5 years.
Very exciting. Yeah, it just shows the need that's out there to me. Yeah, that is very exciting. Okay, so tell us, Brittany, how can people find you?
Probably the easiest way these days is Facebook.
Okay.
And you will see Lindsey on there quite often. She is our Facebook guru.
That is an amazing Facebook page. I'm serious.
Social media expert here.
Yes.
It's really incredible. Okay, so
Yeah.
Facebook, yes.
So you can find our contact information there. You
Okay.
can find our names there, and you can also find a lot of easy tools there. There's posts regularly that have a lot of tools, a lot of resources. We'll link you to other resources. It's a really handy page. If you're not a Facebook user, you can go to Redwood Community Services website, and you can find the training department. All of us belong in the training department. And if not, you can find us at our Ukiah campus, which is on Orchard Avenue.
Okay.
Our
Excellent.
biggest obstacle with this project is that it's hard for us to find out who the right people are to talk to schedule these trainings. So I hope that the people watching this broadcast will think, oh, I know a school that could really use this information. I know a medical clinic that would love to have a free training, because these trainings are all completely free to the community. And so it's sometimes a source of frustration to us, like we have this great thing and it's totally free, and yet we're having a hard time getting the word out. So I hope that people will spread the word for us and let people know that this resource is available in the community, and we think that it's really valuable and that it can really help support people.
And I can't stress how flexible we are.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
We've contacted schools specifically, and they've declined and said, sorry, we don't have time. In service is only 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and we're like, good, because we have 45 minutes for you.
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna make this work.
Oh, great.
So we've also worked, Brittany touched on it in the beginning, we've worked in the evenings, weekends, and again, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, we've done trainings at 7:30 in the morning. We've done trainings at 7:30 at night. We've done them on the weekends. We've done, like, the school staff will want a 3-hour curriculum, but they have 45-minute increments. So we're like, okay, give us, 4 45-minute increments, and we'll cover all the material. So we are just as flexible as we need to be. And we've even had people that say, I like 3 of your curriculums, and we have an hour and a half. Can you fit information that's relevant to us? Sure, we can do that for you.
Wow.
So we take a little bit from trauma-informed care, and a little bit from collaborative problem solving, and a little bit from crisis communication, and here you go, a tailored training just for you.
Custom made, yeah, and no excuses. No
Yeah,
excuses.
right.
Aim to please. So I have to ask you about the new curriculum. I'm so curious what new curriculum you're developing.
So we're actually just adding another evidence-based practice. And Christine,
Okay.
I believe you probably could speak to that the best. Would you like to?
Sure. Yeah, so it's called psychological first aid, and it's an initial disaster response intervention. And so what it does is it provides first responders or people in the community that are volunteering with tools on how to maybe recognize shock in the population that was just affected by the disaster and provide them with immediate, resources and support, again, until they can get professional support. So it's on the ground work. And why it's so important, as you probably know, and it's very obvious, we've been having, numerous wildfires year after year after year. And so I'm not going to jinx us, but it's really important for people to have these skills because if you are in the community, if your family or friends were affected, or you're even volunteering on the front line, this specific training will provide you with the psychological tools and education to intervene with someone who has just maybe lost a home or lost a family member.
Thank you so much. That is really important and is affecting many of us these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a great presentation. I mean, really, I am really impressed. Well, thank you, all of you, very much. We really appreciate your time and energy and the really important work you're doing in the community, breaking down the stigma around talking about mental health. So thank you so much.
Like various causes.